Hey photographer, Jessica Whitaker here, and I am so stoked to teach you the basics of film photography in an easy to understand way from a practical perspective. I teach both film and digital photography here on YouTube to beginners, and I always want to make sure with every video I explain the process as simply as possible so that anyone can take this information and run with it and use it to grow their photography business or in their hobby. So if you want to receive a new photography tutorial in your inbox every single week, be sure to hit subscribe to stick around and to be notified when a new tutorial for your business comes out. In this video, I'm going to be walking you through the basics of how to use a film camera. I'm going to give you an overview of the camera settings and what to do with those settings, where to purchase a film camera and what one might be the best for you to buy, how to get your film actually developed and basically on Instagram, and I'm going to be sharing with you a bit about the kind of film to put in your camera. I even did this video last year, but instead of sitting down and walking you through the camera, I actually taught one of my subscribers in person how to shoot on a film camera, and I'll be referring you to other videos for more in-depth tutorials on different topics. And I want to thank my longtime partner, KEH Camera, for sponsoring this video. When it comes to a film camera, there are three main settings that we are going to focus on. Number one is called ISO, and this is actually determined by the type of film that you purchase. The second setting that we're going to focus on is the shutter speed, and the third setting is the aperture. To begin with ISO, it is determined by the kind of film that we buy, and we have to choose the correct ISO we want to use for our photos. And the ISO, because it is the light sensitivity, is going to depend on how bright it is outside or in our environment. So if you are going to be shooting out in direct sunlight, you're probably going to want to choose ISO 160 or 200, a smaller number. And the more shaded it gets, the darker it gets, the higher the number will be, because your camera needs to be even more sensitive to the light. Do you see here on this roll of film, this is what the film looks like that you will be putting into your camera. There's a number on it, 400. 400 is the ISO. Now, next to that number is a smaller number, usually 24, 30, 32, 36. This is the amount of exposures on the film, and all exposure means is the amount of images you get out of a roll. Now, you do want to make sure that when you are buying this film, you take note of the amount of photos of the exposures, because I've done this many times when starting out in film photography. I actually overshot. So I forgot there's 24 exposures, and my camera, it doesn't tell me. Some cameras do, depending on how much you want to spend on a camera, but typically an entry-level SLR film camera is just going to keep shooting. And so you do want to take note of that number. Once we have determined the ISO, all we have to worry about for each image that we're shooting is the shutter speed and the aperture. Like, it's not that complicated. The next setting that we're going to talk about is the aperture. The aperture is how wide open your lens gets, how much light is going to be let in. The more light that gets in, the smaller the number, the more blurry the background, the brighter it will be. Let's say you want a blurry, creamy background. You are going to want as much light letting into your camera. You're going to want that lens to be as open as possible, because it means more light's coming in. So that number is going to be 1.8, 2.0. It's usually as wide open as your lens will allow. Now, the aperture is adjusted on your lens. Depending on the kind of lens you get will depend on what aperture settings you have available to you. On our camera body is our shutter speed, and our shutter speed is how fast our camera takes the photo. If you are wanting to take a photo of a waterfall and you want the waterfall to be really creamy and almost look like it's a painting, you don't want to see the individual droplets, you're going to have your shutter speed on a much slower speed. Slower. It can take more time to get all of those water drops blended together in the waterfall, that creamy look. It's going to take slower, but more light's going to be let in. If you want to take a photo of a waterfall and you want to get those individual drops, then you're going to have your shutter speed on a higher number. Some cameras will actually have a sensor essentially inside of it that will tell you what to set your shutter speed on. And this camera I have in my hand tells me what shutter speed to set it on. other cameras, there's lots of other popular film cameras on the market where it doesn't tell you. Some cameras will tell you what to set the aperture on, and then you determine the shutter speed. I personally, when I was starting out in film photography, I liked that the shutter speed was what was selected, because my aperture, I like to shoot pretty wide open. We're going to talk about the cameras in particular later on, but that is a little like hack, if you will. But you don't want to use it as a crutch. You still, if you are starting from zero, from scratch with photography knowledge, then you are going to want to do your own research on how these 3 different settings play into taking a photograph. How do we actually determine what film we want to buy? There's lots of different brands and types of film. I have already created a video where I share with you my top 5 types of film to buy. Let's talk now about how to get our film developed. How to get our film from the camera online, on Instagram, on our website. This is something that doesn't have to be complicated, but for me was this big roadblock I had put up in my mind, was the developing process. And I am so excited to announce that you don't actually have to have your own dark room in your bathroom. You don't have to become a chemist all of a sudden. You can go and get your film developed at a lab. And you don't even have to get prints if you don't want to. All you're gonna do, go to a photo lab, not to Walgreens, not to CVS, not to Walmart, not to Costco. You have to go to a photo lab. This is the difficult part, I know. And I will soon be making a blog post. I'll have it down below of my lab recommendation that I have been to visit and I get my film developed in down below. When you get to the lab, this is what you're going to ask them. Hello, I would like to get this roll of film scanned and transferred to me, emailed to me, Dropbox to me. It's going to depend. Each lab does their email differently. Now, you will want to go to the lab and pick up the negatives, or if they are, you're doing it remotely, they'll send you the negatives back. And then these negatives are like a hard copy of the images, and you can take that to another lab and get it developed again. You could scan it yourself eventually at home, but basically you just want a digital copy of what's on this little guide. So you're going to ask for it to be scanned and emailed to you. Now, let's talk about what kind of camera should you buy. Camera that I have in my hands, and like my favorite beginner film camera, is the Minolta X370. I've done an in-depth review of this camera in particular, and I've also done other reviews for other film cameras. So this Minolta X370 review will be on the screen here. I do want to talk about where to even find them in the first place. My mom actually had this camera, the Minolta X370, and it was a bit broken. This ended up breaking, and it would have cost actually more to get this repaired than buying a new Minolta camera. I did a Google search and I came across KEH Camera, which is where I purchased my Minolta X370 from. The price was great. It was $40, and I was able to see that the camera had already been quality tested and had been graded with the quality. So I ended up buying, I believe, an excellent or a very good condition Minolta X370. I wasn't sure how fast the shipping would arrive, if this was going to be like a 3-week ordeal, but it came to my door within like 3 days. I'll have my film camera recommendations down below in the description box. So thank you so much to KEH Camera for sponsoring this video and for making these free film photography tutorials possible. I really hope that this was able to get you started in film photography, and be sure to hit subscribe to be notified when a new tutorial for your photography business, both digital and film, are out for you. If you have questions, more questions about film, then I have a free photography Facebook group called Build and Bloom, full of kind, encouraging photographers who are there to help you out. You can also find me over on Instagram at Jessica Whitaker for daily tips, tools, and resources for your photography business. I have a photography business podcast called Build and Bloom Podcast, available on any platform. If you want to take it one step further, I also have my online photography workshop where I teach you from A to Z how to start and to scale a photography business in your own backyard. I believe in you, and I believe in your business or in your hobby. Whether you want to do photography as a business or as a hobby, you can do it. It doesn't have to be complicated, and I'm here to teach you in the simplest way possible. So be sure to hit subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.